Green Noise is back for season 2.
Welcome to Green Noise, a podcast series from Cape Nature that is bringing nature to life, and we use white noise to try to sleep better, but green noise to make life better.
You've got this wall of fire coming towards you. What are you going to do?
It's a massive shift in tourism.
To build an inclusive and connected society, especially in the Western Cape.
Women just do things differently.
Welcome back to another episode of Green Noise. This is season 2. My name is Dan Corder, your host. And remember, the reason why we call the podcast this is because white noise is great for sleep, but green noise, and by that I mean like environmentally green noise, is the way that you get more richness out of being alive in nature within places like Cape Nature. We've got a fascinating episode for you today. I'm delighted to be joined by Sabina Lehman, who works with a company called Curiositas. Is that right,
That's
Sabina?
Right.
I was really worried about butchering both your name and the name of the company. Curiositas is a specialist attractions and tourism futures consulting company. So what they do is they imagine how the future might turn out, multiple futures based on different technological innovation and development. And for the good and the bad, they try to figure out how to incorporate technology and new cutting edge innovation into our experiences of tourism and sustainability. Was that right?
That's about right, yeah.
No lies detected. That's good.
And curiositas is the Latin word for curiosity.
Okay.
And I use that name because really we bring curios back from our travels to remember where we've come from and to remind us of the time we've had. But we can also bring curios back from the future, so we can imagine some futures and talk about them today and say, what are these artifacts of the future and what guidance or clues do they give us about the futures that we want, and perhaps more importantly, the futures we want to avoid?
For sure. We are coming to you live. I'm not going to say live. Well, I've said live now, so we're going to keep going. We are live right now from Assegai Nature Reserve beyond Stellenbosch, one of the beautiful Cape Nature locations. So thrilled to be here and work at the same time, combining work and pleasure in such a good way. And on this episode, we're going to talk about technological development in the ways that it's affected sustainability and hopefully improved options for sustainability and sustainable practices of nature, and also improved ecotourism. So that's what we're going to be covering today, even with AI technology, which is more and more taking up its place in helping us to be more sustainable and help the planet as we continue to try and enjoy it ourselves. By the way, Cape Nature uses a ton of this stuff. So many different cutting edge innovations Cape Nature takes advantage of. They're using drones to track populations of key bird species in different parts of South Africa. I actually don't have the big words to handle this story on my own, but they're working with NASA technology, the NASA technology, on a project called Bioscape, where NASA's got this cutting-edge hyperspectral sensors, which sounds like something that you have to do at least 3 years of university to truly understand. And these sensors cover hundreds of bands across what is called the electromagnetic spectrum, and will be augmented by structural sensors such as ELVAs to measure the 3D shape of vegetation. And they're doing that and using that technology in a lot of Cape Nature reserves because we've got this extraordinary world-breaking biosphere of fynbos and the entire kind of garden route biosphere. So it is absolutely fascinating to see how Cape Nature is using it already. But now I want to hear from Sabina, who literally does this kind of thinking and imagining and consulting for a living. So Sabina, let's start with the tech revolution, but particularly AI, which is what everybody is talking about now. How has AI disrupted or affected the tourism sector already?
Yes, so it actually started a while ago already, and it started with the airlines, who started using AI technology to forecast demand for their flights and their routes, and hence is using dynamic pricing. So everybody now knows, and when I was growing up, you paid one price for your seat no matter when you flew, and the person next to you certainly paid the same price as you. And of course, we now know that those price changes all the time. And that's really where it started almost 3 decades ago.
Do you bother to... I spend an extra 50 Rand to pick my seat.
Yeah,
I don't do the extra 50 Rand for priority boarding. I couldn't bother with that.
It changes.
But I need to have a window seat near the back of the plane.
It changes on my mood of the day. And I have to say, I still get frustrated at the thought that I might be getting a cheaper price elsewhere, and I probably spent too many hours looking that direction, and thus not saving time or money. But AI, artificial intelligence, is certainly infiltrating and influencing our lives in more ways than we can imagine. And particularly if you're not involved yourself, it's often hidden in the background. And of course, it has both benefits and risks. But ultimately, it's here to stay, and we need to understand how we can work with it and how we can use it to suit our needs and our goals, our purpose.
So let's talk about first data-driven conservation, how important it is to be able to process, deal with, capture, and then respond to more and more data that we're now able to gather, whether it's drones counting all the birds or whether it's like using other kinds of tracking technology for like zebra translocation, how AI can be worked into handling that in ways that almost is too much for human beings.
Well, I think that's the issue, is that AI deals with big data. So in collecting it, and perhaps in collecting it in new and unusual ways. I was just reading up about eDNA, for example. So this is electronic DNA that tracks the residue of, for example, some I can't remember the exact name of the mole now on the West Coast. It tracks its burrow linings. So in the absence of the animal, you can still track where it's been, where it's going, how it's behaving. And as with so much with nature, the complexity of it, the data size is huge. So the first aspect of AI is really collecting vast sums of data. And that we've been doing for almost 3 decades already. Yeah. The next step has been in how do we group that data? You need a human to decide which data you want to group. It's a little bit like on your phone when you ask your phone to, collect all the images of your family, or to collect all the images of your New Year's over the last 10 years and put them into one folder. And then, of course, you need to decide what are you going to do with that data. So there is a lot that it can do. There's a lot that it can't do. It still requires human intervention for intelligence and for choosing which information to track. But again, it'll evolve. It'll really evolve over the decades to come.
And how in the world, and then more locally, specifically in the Western Cape, is AI being used to create better, more sustainable ecotourism?
So one of the big things in tourism is really the funneling of people and tourists to more than just, let's call it, the bucket list destinations.
I see.
Because ultimately, if we can spread demand over seasonality and over geographical space, we have a more even distribution of tourists.
Sure.
And you're not needing to build more hotels because, in fact, they're used up also in the quiet times.
You're spreading the load. Okay.
You're spreading the load, and you've invited visitors, both local, domestic and international, to perhaps visit in the off-peak times, or to perhaps visit to places that are unknown or quieter. And so I really think, certainly in tourism, AI and the spreading of geographical and time demand is one of the greatest tools we have. Because people just don't know what's out there. And, for example, this morning I drove from Cape Town through to Assegai here in the Hoek Mountains, and it was AI that told me which is the quickest route. It was gathering data, told me a quieter route with less traffic but might take longer. And that's exactly what can be used for tourism, to really spread that demand.
I think what's extraordinary about the Western Cape, and Cape Nature locations sometimes are a part of that, is that there's such a wealth of extraordinary things to go and do. I did a video the other day about Chapman's Peak, which is one of the most jaw-dropping, phenomenal roads in the world in terms of view, in terms of architecture, in terms of the feat of engineering to create it. And I just made a video being like, guys, I don't know if you know this, but one of the best things to do in Cape Town is go and drive this road. And so many people, except I guess most Cape Townians were like, what? We've never heard of this jaw-dropping site before. So I really hear what you're saying about that.
And my sort of comment on that is, just on Tuesday I had to go to a meeting from Wellington and from there to Worcester, and I had an international visitor with me, and I said, let's do Bainskloof Pass and let's stop at Tweedetoll, which is also a Cape Nature site, for a swim. Overseas they call it wild swimming. We call it just swimming in a river.
What do you mean wild swimming? Just not in a pool?
Not in a pool, and I was teasing my UK niece actually that was with me, and I was saying, well, for us it's just swimming in a river, but a beautiful, clean, we were the only people there. And I mean, that road building and road engineering on Bainskloof is amazing. So that's an example where, you can start pushing people to lesser known areas and to driving instead of Champions Peak is amazing, and you pay your toll there, but Tweedetoll, you can pay your Cape Nature entrance fee and have this entire river system for yourself and swim in these beautiful rock pools, which is really not available to many people in the world, right? And we still have swimmable, clean rivers managed by Cape Nature. So that is a good example of leading people on a different track and giving them a good experience.
For sure. And I'm also interested in the ways that AI is able to kind of predict like what you will like. So everybody has complex feelings about targeted ads.
Yes.
And sure, a lot of the time I just don't need that Lilo and Stitch shaped trinket from China that's probably going to work for about 6 days. But like a lot of the targeted advertising gleaning from like big data algorithms from like social media can go, okay, you've liked these 7 things. I'm pretty sure you'll like this 8th thing, even if it's not on the top of every tourism list.
Yes, exactly. So it can direct us to other, if you like this, you will also like that. I call it the Netflix effect, which again has positives to it. It also has negatives to it. And I find that perhaps we are becoming less open to courageous decisions, to investigating things we don't like.
Okay,
We are perhaps less open to trying new things, also to serendipity, to stumbling across something that you didn't know you liked, like swimming in a river / wild swimming. My niece said she would never have stopped there because it looked like the office on the side of the road didn't look like a picnic spot or a swimming spot.
Yes, for sure.
So yes, AI could have directed you to stop here and said, we recommend an hour's rest here. But at the same time, we need to be careful as humans that we remember we have our own human volition and engagement, that engaging with others, being courageous to try new things that many people will say, I'm a bit afraid of the wild. It's very quiet. Am I safe? I'm scared of animals. I'm scared of snakes. So AI can help you perhaps talk through those or understand how valid those fears are. At the same time, I am conscious that it's taking away serendipity and sort of exploring, and I'm hooked on the word curiosity and being curious about things that we don't know anything about. So there's always this fine balance with technology, right? And we will have to see how that unfolds.
And I mean, that's exactly what I want to ask you next in terms of different kinds of jobs. So we know that technology and AI and huge data processing can yield a lot of benefit. Like another example is digital mapping of vast areas of land and making it responsive to your GPS location, which is good for fighting fires and monitoring all kinds of potential threats, and also just understanding better the terrain that people move through. But when people hear of AI and big tech, they think I'm going to lose my job.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to hear from you about the space of ecotourism and sustainability in the Western Cape. What kind of jobs may no longer exist? What kind of jobs may really just require you to reskill and upskill to use technology to better do your own job more effectively?
I think it's very exciting for young people of today, Gen Alpha, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. They're at the intersection of a sort of beautiful spheres. One is that, first of all, they're a demographic, obviously, that are younger and therefore will be living in our future for longer. I mean, the future is a neutral space. It belongs to all of us. We all have the same rights for a future that suits us. But some of us will be living longer in that future and have a greater vested interest in a future that is sustainable. At the same time, this generation are digital natives. They're very au fait and comfortable with technology. I haven't been able to print out my notes because last minute my printer, I need my young person to help me. But our digital natives are very comfortable with that. And finally, our younger cohorts, generational cohorts, are interested in working in jobs with purpose. So if you put those 3 things together, they're longer in the future, they're more invested in it, they want jobs with purpose, and they've grown up as digital natives.
Sure.
There's a beautiful intersection of a comfort with technology and what it can give, an understanding of where its failures are and what to be beware of, which I think older generations, we all have grandparents who, they get some email spam and, but they addressed me in person. It must be real,
Yeah, there was that South African woman living in Cape Town last year who was fully in a relationship with who she thought was Elon Musk on WhatsApp. And she sent him millions of rands, and he was about to arrive for the wedding for like 8 months. And then we discovered that a year before she'd been in a WhatsApp relationship with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Oh, my word.
She is an extraordinary game.
Yeah, exactly.
Online.
So I think for young people, it's an incredibly exciting time. And what's interesting in conservation, including Cape Nature, is that they're often on the forefront of these technology changes because, of course, They're dealing with global and local issues. They are dealing with big data.
Sure.
And so in many cases, they've been the first to use technology and AI and translate it into their needs. And often they're at the forefront, and South Africa is very much at the forefront. I find that very exciting. At the same time, there is an increasing need for the human touch. So tell me stories. When I walk on a wilderness trail, I want a real guide. I don't want to be guided by an AI robot. I want someone who's lived that experience, and that too has power. And I also want to make a comment that the antithesis of working with AI and technology is the now very real absence of technology. So when you are in spaces where tech isn't available to you, it has a heft.
Yeah, you get stressed.
And a weight.
You get itchy.
Or a beauty, right? There's suddenly a silence. There's suddenly, I've got to figure my own route here because I don't have Wi-Fi
Suddenly you've got
and
to have
whatever.
your own thoughts. You
Gotta
can't
have your
just
own
doom
thoughts.
scroll your
You've
way
got to
into...
you've got to interact with your guide and actually speak to that person. So the absence of technology is as much a thing as technology, and people can be quite afraid of that, actually.
Absolutely.
I heard of an example where a family, an international family, had booked a canoeing trip up the Zambezi. Right. And it was a 3-day overnight trip, and their guide took them to their first camp. Yeah. And the parents were with their 2 teenagers, and they went to the guide later that afternoon, early evening, and said, look, we've had a fantastic day, but we'd love to just have a drink and chill. So if you don't mind, could you switch the Wi-Fi on now? And the guide was like, we are in the wilderness, and there is no Wi-Fi. And the parents asked to be evacuated. They said, we weren't told that.
Evacuated? They had
to turn back and get people sent up to take them out.
I don't know. It says a lot about that marriage and that family. That the prospect of 3 hours with just each other is intolerable.
Yeah. So this is the duality of where we're in.
I guess what is so exciting about technology is that you can shape exactly the kind of style of engagement with nature that you find most rewarding. So I'm one of those incredibly difficult people who wants to go up into natural environments and be left alone. Mm-hmm. I don't need to feel like I need to socially perform for anybody. I want to escape and just be my true, messy, sloppy self as best I can. Which is why things like, if you really want to have some solace and some alone time in ways that guides don't want to do, or like there's no guide available that day, Cape Nature's got this cool thing called voice mapping, where you can essentially experience the podcast of your walk and be carried through with the information and kind of the human touch, or at least the human experience that you want, while still being able to get that kind of solace, which is really great. I wanted to ask you though, because I was really interested by what you said about young people being so particularly able to fairly effortlessly understand the way that technology can help and improve certain activities. But often the older, more experienced guides and ecotourism people are, one, far more knowledgeable, two, far more capable and adept and experienced at providing a good, enriching time to visitors, to hikers and the rest. And so I would be interested to hear from you how older guides and older ecotourism workers who've got all of this immense experience and skill that they've learned and honed over many years can get into learning a bit about technology and a bit more, and becoming a bit more agile and versatile with things like AI functions, so that they can add that to their, quiver.
Yes. I think in those cases, it's often a case of, does it solve a problem for me?
Right.
Because then I know I've got a need for it, right? And so even older guides, right, use a lot of technology. They might leave the bush and then go home and get their payslip or online banking. They're certainly using their cell phones.
Sure.
But for example, I can consider that you are guiding a trail and there are 2 Chinese, 2 Germans and 4 Afrikaans-speaking South Africans.
Right.
Now maybe there's an AI translation app that in someone's ear that beautifully translates. Maybe it's even just your accent, right?
It's like the Babel fish from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Exactly.
That's great.
Exactly. Or I have a blind friend and she's introduced me to a lot of the how technology can help her, right? And one of them, for example, is a spoken description of everything you're undergoing. I
see.
So we go to Africa Burn, which has got no tech, no Wi-Fi, no whatever. And it's currently still in human form. You can book a person that walks with you and describes everything that you're seeing. They've been trained. She tried it with me and I was fired because she said I said something was green, and she's like, Sabina, what tone of green? Does it have sequence?
Yeah, they
you
should
know?
hire
Is
radio
it?
presenters.
Yeah,
That's like my
there
whole
you
job.
go. There you go. So, and she was describing, I was actually walking with her on Table Mountain, and she was saying it would be very useful. She's got a guide dog, but the guide dog can't speak. Yet
Weak
that
guide
guide dog is phenomenal. But she was describing how having something translate what you're seeing
Sure.
would be quite useful, right? So I do think technology, on the one hand, is this broad use of data and aggregating data. On the other hand, can also hone right down to, in a group of 8 people, somebody's very specific needs. The foreign language speaker, or the English speaker that doesn't understand a local accent, or the blind friend that's on your trip, all in the same group are getting something,
Sure.
still led by a guide ultimately,
Right.
who is guiding what you're looking at. So it's very exciting, but there's always moments when you bump up against it, and I'm not sure how I would feel being in the wilderness trail with other people with an earpiece on. Personally, that would disturb me, but then I'm older and I'm happy without tech. I consider it an absolute blessing if I'm somewhere without tech. So.
For sure. But tell me about virtual tourism then, because then you mentioned people who are blind and who want to still experience nature and get out there. What about people who are just physically unable for any kind of physical malady, or just because they can't get to a particular place, they want to experience nature also? It's not necessarily just a live stream of somebody walking around in a Cape Nature Reserve, right? I mean, there's even I don't know if the metaverse is going to become a thing, but we'll see. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it has enormous potential, both in introducing people to concepts that they are fearful of or haven't yet experienced. There's also going back to kind of over-tourism. For example, the Antarctic now has 90,000 visitors a year. People go to the Antarctic because it's rare, and very few people go, well, how many people come to Assegai-Busch a year, right? If you really want an experience that very few people have experienced, you should probably come here. So it means that you could have that Antarctic experience in the metaverse somewhere else, right, without actually accessing it, and perhaps therefore protecting our vulnerable natural areas. So, but again, there's always some people who want to be there themselves, which is great. And then there's others who say, I'm happy to. It's really no different to looking at a nature documentary and learning something about the gorillas or the lions
But like more accessible, right?
Yeah.
So like the thing about those David Attenborough documentaries is I always just think, but like that's the most beautiful shot, the most unique, insane animal moment. That's not a casual everyday experience where I can go out and experience that. Whereas with some kind of metaverse or virtual tourism, there's more of a potential to go look at this beautiful place, Assegai-Busch, come and experience it through the visual and the sonics of my digital coverage of it. And then maybe at some point you'll go, oh no, I care about that spot now. I've got an emotional resonance with it. I understand its value and I might go there one day. But even if I don't, there's so much, I mean, you were talking about like the digital world kind of consuming us and removing us from physical human life and everyday life and spontaneity. I always laugh about how few people meet people in bars anymore. It's like a great example versus like online.
Yeah.
And then I think about the fact that more people who use virtual tourism or the metaverse will probably be able to create some kind of deep emotional care for nature and conservation through that, even if they can't go there themselves.
That's right. It's about access in its broadest form. And I think about during COVID, what became so popular were those virtual safaris.
Yes.
And I mean, some of them had massive followings from all over the world. And what was interesting to me there is the play between, as you said, the David Attenborough, the perfect shot, versus the authenticity of a long drive, even in a virtual safari where nothing was seen, but the guides were talking you through it and you could hear the sounds of the bush, etc.
Yeah, it's a bit shaky and it feels like
you're
on FaceTime
so again,
with your
I
family.
did 2 of them, and the one was the perfect virtual safari. You could see they'd cut it and only shown you lion prides when they came across them. And the other one was a safari that felt like a proper safari experience, where there's long periods where you're not necessarily engaging.
Sure.
And similarly, recently, I don't watch a lot of rugby, I have to confess, but I went to the stadium.
It's also a nature documentary.
Yeah, exactly. Animals fighting it out for survival.
Some kind of tribal.
So so think about how we've become so used to watching sport on TV with its rewind and its commentary and great angles, and then when I got to the stadium, I need to wear glasses. I could hardly see, or what happened? I missed that. I was busy leaning down to get something. So again, we get used to things presented to us in a technological form, and then have to almost take a step back when you observe it in real life, and it's
Right.
authentic, and it's messy, and it's dirty, and
Right.
it's not perfect.
I'm kind of better that way.
Yeah, I find it better that way, but that is, again, also a bit of a learning curve for people, right?
So one of the ways that Cape Nature is engaging with the potential of things like virtual tourism to try and get people to fall in love with and learn more about not just Cape Nature's reserves and biospheres that Cape Nature cares for and looks after, but also all different kinds across South Africa and the world, is that Cape Nature has created this digital series that is highly educational, targeted at school kids, essentially explaining to them for different Cape Nature reserves what's beautiful and great about them, what kind of animal and I guess the floras and the fauna kingdoms that they then get school kids, and it's also targeted at their parents, to watch, learn a lot about, create a far deeper and more meaningful relationship with their environment that they can interact with, and hopefully one day get them to go and visit and actually enjoy those natural spaces themselves, which I think is completely epic and part of that kind of multiverse imaginary that you were talking about.
Absolutely, and it's quite interesting to me because it talks to a grand social shift of how we deal with out-of-home experiences
Right.
and entertainment. So in the past, in the 50s and 60s, people went out of the home for experiences and entertainment.
Yeah.
And what they learned, the aim was in museums and nature experiences that you take that back into the home. You recycle at home, you whatever. You put a bird feeder up for local birds, etc. The opposite, the grand social shift has been that we are spending all our time and money in home entertainment.
Right.
And you've got to now connect with people in their home, usually through technology,
And then get them
and
outside.
encourage them to get out of the home. It's a massive shift in tourism, and I'm not sure all tourism organizations have understood that.
Sure.
Because leaving home, there's traffic, there's money, you've got to agree on where you're going to go together.
There's
Well, why
strangers.
would I go to this? Yeah, there's strangers. Why would I go to a nature reserve? I'm not sure I like nature reserves. I've never
Yes.
experienced one. So the grand social shift has been from out-of-home entertainment and learnings that you'd bring back home to exactly the opposite way around. And it's a far bigger job that I think many of us realize that we have to do.
So interesting. Sabina, I'd love to hear about an example of how AI can be used and is already being used for specific people to get the most out of their personal dream holiday or dream Sunday or Saturday adventure.
That's really interesting because I was talking to a friend about it and saying, oh, ChatGPT, which is AI, right? Like, how are you using it? And they said, well, they're a family of 4, 2 daughters, husband, wife. And she said, oh, well, we've just put out our, actually they went to Zanzibar,
Okay.
our Zanzibar itinerary together using ChatGPT. And I said,
Huh.
really? Like, is that really going to work for you? Let me know when you get back, you know. And they had a fantastic time because she said she kept, again, it requires human prompting.
Right.
But, you know, she started off with saying, what are the top things to see? Then she was like, well, I don't want to do all the tourist things. We're interested in culture.
Sure.
We want a week with 2 days off on the beach. We want hotels that are boutique but not within this price category that are suitable for teenagers. I want 3 days with a digital detox with no access to Wi-Fi at all. Which restaurants do you recommend? And she then showed me this 10-page itinerary tailored exactly
Wow.
to their needs.
And did it work out?
She said it worked out.
Wow.
Yep, she said it worked out, yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
So interesting. Thank you so much for your time, Sabina Lehman. I really, Lehman, sorry.
Lehman,
I
yeah.
really appreciate it from Curiositas. What an interesting job that you have, imagining all these futures and engaging with how we, and I guess consulting also with different kinds of brands to try
Yeah.
and get the squeeze out of sustainability
I
and
do,
ecotourism.
yeah. I want to just add something there. We always use the word futures with an S. It's
Okay.
multiple futures, which you've just done, futures, because we understand that there are many, the future's not entirely predictable.
Absolutely.
And it's certainly not one future that is upon us. There are multiple versions of a future that could happen. Good ones, bad ones, going along the same path very slowly, leading to collapse or leading to gain. And so we talk about a plurality of futures and which ones do we want to avoid, which ones do we want to move towards, and how do we gain momentum to move towards those futures that suit us.
Absolutely, man, it's so interesting. And now you listening to this, thank you so much for watching, because we're also videoing it, or listening to this episode of Green Noise, a Cape Nature podcast series. And now that you've heard all of this, and thought about all of this, go check out opportunities for metaverse and virtual tourism. Go think about different ways that you can incorporate technology into your next experience of nature and try to become more sustainable, and go see what Cape Nature is doing in these kinds of cutting edge tech fields by going onto Cape Nature's social media or content platforms, and also Cape Nature's website. Thank you so much for listening/watching.